This is the training module, the brutal facts. Again, most of these modules, there's lots of layers to them. I'm going to give you the most simplified version of the brutal facts. So let me change my camera over and I'll show you what it looks like. All right. First thing I do is I make sure everyone has a sheet of paper. They're buddied up would help, or they can discuss this at their table. It can work either way. That's probably best. So make sure they have a sheet of paper, and they're going to use it vertical for portrait. And at the top, you write brutal facts, and then put no place left. Put brackets around it just like that. All right. And then the first thing we do, we want to put just to kind of, there's just going to be three main sections to it. And I just put a one right here and then put population. And at this point, what you want to do, we'll just pick the area in which you're doing the training and then put a line underneath it and then put another line over here, just like that. And you ask everyone, what's the population of this area? And it's always interesting to see what people say. They'll be all over the map, but just for the sake of simplicity, let's say 100,000 people. All right. Then ask the question, what do you think the percentage of lostness is in this area? And you're going to hear all kinds of numbers. I just did a training and one guy put 20%, another person said 80%. The North American Mission Board puts the lowest rate of lostness in any part of the United States, which is in the southern belt, southern like Bible Belt, is at 75% lostness. And it tops out at like 99%, like in frontier areas like Vermont and Oregon and places like that. But for the sake of argument, we're just going to put the lowest number. It's typically about 75% of lostness in the South. The more you get up north, it starts to leap into the 80s and the 90s. So 75% of lostness of 100,000, that's 75,000 people in this given area that, according to our statistics, when they die, they will be in a hopeless eternity. Now, at this point, I kind of let it sink in. And I asked the question, whose job is it to get to these people and tell them the gospel? And so that creates a question. And then I ask another question, is there an example anywhere in scripture where a number this big or even bigger, where a lot of people heard the gospel, a number this size heard the gospel in a short period of time, not necessarily got saved, but heard the gospel? And so you ask that question and you'll hear all kinds of answers like Pentecost and feeding the 5,000 or whatever, something like that. And those are all good guesses. But there is actually one example. And at this point, you write Acts chapter 19, verses 8 through 10. And you ask them to read this at their table, or buddied up, whatever, but most likely at their table, and just say, hey, what do you guys see happening in these three verses? And so you give them just a few minutes to read and make some observations. So they make some observations. And then, like I said, give them, I don't know, 3-4 minutes at most. And then you come back and go, hey, guys, what did you see? And they're going to say a lot of stuff. It's a fascinating passage. Paul was in the synagogue, spent 3 months there, wasn't getting anywhere, took his disciples and went to the hall Tyrannus, or the school Tyrannus, and then it says all of Asia heard the gospel in a matter of 2 years. So a lot to observe there. But what we want to focus on that is what we just mentioned, is that all Asia heard the message of the kingdom or the gospel. That is a remarkable statement. As best we can tell, and this is a rather large spectrum or number, but it was somewhere between 7 to 14 million people lived in that area of southwest uh, Turkey at that time, turn of Asia Minor. A lot of people. And the other thing that struck me is how short a period of time it took. 2 years. It's almost a hyperbolic statement to say that. So we have an example where a large portion of people heard the gospel, didn't really get to say, but they heard the gospel in a relatively short period of time. Now, as a group, you can do this depending on your time. I asked the question, how do you think that happened? In such a that so large an area got covered with the gospel in such a short period of time. And it appears to me, this might be a leap, that Paul never left the Hall of Tyrannus in those 2 years. And the Hall of Tyrannus most likely was no bigger than a small home because they were fleeing from the synagogue. So how did that happen? Well, he let the group kind of talk about it because again it's stoking them, and then we end with number 3, and we're going to ask 2 questions. What is it going to take for everybody in our area here at Gospel? We call it the wig take. That's maybe some cool way of putting it. What is it going to take for everybody in where we live, 100,000 people, to hear the gospel? Just a simple question. What's it going to take? All right. And then the second question we want to answer. What are you willing to die to make that happen? So at your table, I want you to discuss these 2 questions. And then let's come back and let's hear what do you think it's going to take for this to happen? And what are you willing to die to see that many people hear the gospel? All right. That is Brutal Facts. Hope you enjoy it.